Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another session of the Neota Network. Welcome back. So today we are going to switch gears a little bit for this talk and get into process risk analysis. So that's a method of examining and classifying legal operational processes into categories based on a variety of factors. And today we have a very exciting speaker to bring that to you. We have Shaimal Adanki, who's a consultant over at Parta Legal. And Shaimal has over 15 years of experience in process automation and process optimization, which bridges the gap between operational processes and IT. And Shaimal has also championed process improvements and developed projects in a number of industries, with examples including aerospace, legal, commercial real estate, manufacturing, and insurance. Shaimal's got an MBA from Oxford University, where he focused on operations management and economics, and a BSc from aerospace engineering from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. So a lot of areas of expertise coming at you, including process risk analysis, process optimization, and digital transformation. But why don't we go right to the source, and I'll pass it over to you, Shaimal. So take it away.
Thanks very much, Max. Definitely appreciate it. Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk about process risk analysis, and it sounds like quite a mouthful. So if you are listening to this, then I'm guessing it's something that you're interested in as well. Um, it's a very important field if you are looking to go down the road of process automation, and I think it's something that's often overlooked. With a lot of risk behind it. So I'd like to, jump right in and explain why you should do it and what it is and how it can really help you along the journey. This is obviously a very high level view. There's a lot of detail and study that we can get into, on this topic. But this is, a good introduction that I think everybody could use. So let's start with why do we need to do process risk analysis? The fact of the matter is when most firms make come to a point where they realize it's time to go down the road of process automation and digital transformation. Oh, I'm going to say that again. Let me just go back here. The fact of the matter is when most firms realize it's time to go down the road of process automation and digital transformation, there's many different factors that they consider on how to start the pilot project. What are the first few processes we look at? Most often, and this is really across industries, we look at things like the process that creates the most problems or impacts the bottom line the most, or the processes that people complain about or open tickets about. And if you're the project leader, oftentimes it's the process that annoys you the most. Oh, I hate filing expense reports. I wish we could digitize that process. And that's what drives the pilot projects. However, the problem with that is you're really taking a process that doesn't work well and automating it and saying we can do workflows and robotic process automation or digital transformation behind it, and you end up creating more of a mess because you've taken a bad process, or you end up spending a lot of time and money to improve that process to get it ready for digitization, which should be done anyway. However, the main gains that you've realized are from the process improvement first. So to really prove out the concept, we need to looking at our most efficient processes for automation. So process risk analysis gives you that visibility. It's a way to understand your process landscape, which ones are your more mature processes, which ones are your processes that are weak and might be struggling a little bit. And it's also a way to understand how these processes impact your business model. In other words, you're asking the question, are your processes aligned with your firm's operations? And are your processes aligned with the firm's strategy? And I'll get into a little bit more detail of what these specifically mean. When we talk about doing process risk analysis, it's a mix of qualitative and quantitative measurements. Let's say this is how you've documented a process in your firm. This could be anything from a matter closure process to accounts receivable process or billing and invoicing. Regardless of what it is, you have a documented process on how it should work. Then we sit down and discuss this with some of the key users and understand how do they really perform the process. And it should come as no surprise that oftentimes people are doing things in a slightly different way. Sometimes they're skipping a few steps, sometimes they're adding additional steps. Now, often this is caused by either a lack of training, the use of specific tools and software that either prevent things from happening or require a user to do additional steps. Or often it's also that a user has found a shortcut, they found a better way to do it, and we need to recognize that as well. This is what we call a process that it might be accurate, but it's not precise. There's a lot of waste happening in this process. The other thing is you might have situations where a user follows all the process steps, but yet somehow can end up with multiple outcomes. This could be where we go through the entire process for example, sending an invoice, but every time we do, the invoice gets sent to a slightly different email address for the same vendor. And you wonder why. And we've got to sit and track what's happening in that case. But again, realistically, you have a combination of both. And this is where you start really understanding, hey, we've got an issue here with the process. What can we do? How do we address this? And once you've done this sort of qualitative work of understanding key users and how they're performing and what they're doing, you can then quantify this with a scoring model, which I'll come to as well in a second. With these sort of analysis that you do for your process risks, you can then map it into a four-square chart. And the point of doing the quantitative analysis will be to plot that data on a chart where you can see how your process landscape is in terms of variation and waste, and give you a much better visibility of your overall maturity from a process standpoint. But then there's another element to this, because here we're looking at single processes and their operations. Now, for each one of those, we can look at different types of process risk as well. And roughly speaking, you can categorize them into three ways. Short-term risks are where you have process issues that affect performance today. Again, this is an example where you're invoicing, let's say, the wrong amounts to your vendors, or your accounts payable cycles aren't working very well, or you're not billing every hour that you should be billing. This is causing problems today. This is, the allegory of a car. Your car is leaking oil. There's something that needs to be fixed right away. Midterm risks, as you look at your processes, are where you identify ones that are working on specific problems. However, they're either not optimized, they're not digitized, they're not as advanced as they could be. And this creates two problems. On one side, it's a question of your own profitability and how efficient your processes are. And on the other side, it's also your competitive advantage. This means that if another firm was able to perform this process better, faster, get better turnarounds, that becomes their competitive advantage. A simple example would be you're mailing invoices instead of sending them electronically. It's the process works, but it could be improved. And then long-term risks are again where you do have stable processes, but then you're really looking at what is the firm's growth strategy, what's the firm's 5-year plan, and are the processes scalable to meet that? The cases that I've seen are typically when companies or firms want to expand into other regions of the world, and you look at your existing processes and say, would that work? Does that meet all the requirements in these other countries? Do we have to make any changes in nomenclature and documentation to do it? And so these are the three levels of risk that you also want to look at for each of your processes. When we take it back to process automation, long-term risks are not the kind of things we need to focus on. That can come much later on. Short-term risks need some other improvements, and we want to make sure we're plugging those gaps with technology and automation. And the medium-term risks are really the ones that are ripe for pilot projects and so on. So once you've done all this sort of risk analysis, as I mentioned, you can actually put them into a quantitative view. And this is an example from an engineering company that we work with. And this is how you can look at each specific process. There is a method to do a deeper scoring model for your processes and your process risks. And essentially, this lets you now look at your landscape and plot all of these and understand where we should go. In this example, we actually, when we started the project and we asked the executive steering team, where are we starting with digital transformation? The two processes that really stuck out for them was their really configuration and releasing of engineering models. Those were causing the biggest problems and the biggest delays. And they anticipated that's where they would want to start. Those are these two processes plotted here. And as you can see, these are probably the worst ones to start with. We would have spent so much more effort trying to either fix the processes, or we would have ended up automating things that caused them to fail faster and more often instead of starting up here. So this visibility is the kind of thing most firms and most companies don't necessarily have when we just talk process automation. The point of doing process risk analysis, it's a great way to have this landscape. And you don't have to do this just for digital transformation and process automation. I encourage everybody to do these exercises, do these workshops once every 6 months or even once a quarter, depending obviously on your complexity of process landscape. It also gives you a chance to view these processes, even outside digital transformation, do need some improvement. We need to tackle the problems here, and you can then track how your processes are moving, how they're improving through time. So this is a primer on process risk analysis. I hope it was useful. And I look forward to answering any questions that might arise. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Shaimal. I think there's a lot to dig in here, but I think this primer is a good kicking off point for starting your journey on understanding exactly what you're trying to solve for and the most efficient way that you can solve for it. So that's hugely helpful. So thank you, Shaimal, and thank you everyone else for joining us today on this episode of the Neota Network. Lots more to come. So we'll see you in the next session. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Max.